Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the high-level corporate dialogue organized by the Terry Business Council for Sustainable Development as a curtain raiser to the 15th edition of Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. Businesses and corporates play a key role in achieving the goals of sustainable development. In order to address issues related to sustainable development and to promote leadership in environmental management, social responsibility, and economic performance, the Terry Business Council for Sustainable Development has been organizing this corporate dialogue to bring together business leaders from India and around the world to deliberate upon this subject on a common platform. The theme of the high-level corporate dialogue this year is Delhi to Paris, Corporate Vision on Climate Change. May I now request Dr. R.K. Pachauri, Director General Terry and President Terry BCSD to deliver the welcome address.
Honorable Minister of State for Finance, Shri Jayant Sinha ji, Mr. Paul Polman, Dr. Madsen, Dr. Rana Kapoor, Mr. Mukundan, my colleague Dr. Annapurna Vancheswaran, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege and a very deep pleasure for me to welcome the Honorable Minister, the distinguished speakers on the stage, and you ladies and gentlemen. I think the very fact that we are holding this meeting on a theme that clearly is going to have a profound impact on the future of human activities and the state of this planet says a lot. And I believe that we have arrived at a juncture where it's not merely governments, civil society, research institutions, and academia that are going to bring about change. I think at the vanguard of the change will be the corporate sector. I had said earlier that if the corporate sector leads, then clearly governments and civil society cannot be far behind. And this indeed is a very heartening development. I take personal satisfaction and pleasure in watching where we are going and looking at the entire history of this journey. It was really in 1989 that Terry got into the business of climate change. As a matter of fact, in 1988, I was president of the International Association for Energy Economics, which is a professional body. At that stage, it had over 3,000 members, including the chief economists of all the major oil companies, the chief executives of electric utilities. And in the annual address, I addressed this gathering and told them that energy economists need to now focus on the issue of climate change. And of course, the whole audience thought that I had gone mad because I was supposed to be president of an organization that believed essentially in status quo. And then we launched a major activity in Terry in the study and research into the issue of climate change. And I must say we were very fortunate at that stage. Ambassador Das Gupta, who is now a distinguished fellow at Terry, was then with the government of India and was a very active member of the intergovernmental negotiating team that was developing the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we provided continuous inputs to him. And I was really enthused, I was really delighted at the fact that climate change was getting the attention that it was, culminating in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992. I then got involved in the IPCC. I was a lead author in 2 working groups of the second assessment report. For the third assessment report, I was vice chair of the IPCC and then took over as chairman of the IPCC in 2002. And I'm mentioning this because clearly at that point of time, there was a great deal of pessimism that the world is not going to change and climate change is going to become progressively more serious, as indeed we have found in the most recent fifth assessment report of the IPCC. Just to give you a few facts, if we don't do anything about climate change, and if we don't add any efforts to mitigate emissions of greenhouse gases, we could get temperature increase by the end of this century of up to 4.8 degrees Celsius. And do you know what the difference in average temperature is between the Ice Age and the interglacial periods? No more than 4 degrees Celsius or so. So clearly, we're going to bring about a major disruption of everything that sustains life, that has promoted life on this planet, if we allow this level of climate change to take place. Sea level rise, if we do nothing about this problem, will be up to 0.98 meters by the end of this century. And that's close to a meter. And that means we're going to alter the geography of this planet. Not to speak of all the other impacts. The one point I want to emphasize is that climate change is not merely just a smooth and steady increase in temperature. Climate change is a disruption of the climate system, and we have found in the IPCC that extreme events, particularly heat waves and extreme precipitation events, are significantly on the increase. And the intensity and frequency will increase much further by the end of the century unless we do something about it. And it's not merely economic losses, which incidentally have been estimated between the period 1980 and 2008 as varying from a few $1 billion a year to $200 billion a year, which took place in 2005, which was the year of Hurricane Katrina. But you cannot monetize all the losses. What about the loss of cultural heritage? What about the loss of lives? What about the fear that people live under? Our Prime Minister recently went to Fiji, and he mentioned that he met the leaders of the small island states in that location. And he found all of them living in a state of fear. So I think those are issues that really cannot be monetized. And therefore, not only is there a rationale for the corporate sector to worry about the impacts of climate change, all of which is going to certainly affect economic activities, but also the fact that society itself will have to bear the burden of the impacts of climate change, and therefore it's going to affect corporate activity. What is even more important is the fact that if the world is going to move towards a low-carbon future and mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases, there's a huge amount of opportunity that the corporate sector will be able to reap the benefits of. So, having said so, I'm really very, very happy that we have this kind of response. And I just want to end by giving you something from the New York Times of January 31, where they talk about the risky business project, which incidentally has some of the leading lights of the corporate sector that are part of this. He mentions Mr. Greg Page, who is the chairman, executive chairman of Cargill. You have people like Hank Paulson, who was Treasury Secretary from Goldman Sachs earlier, Mr. Rubin, and a whole galaxy of these iconic leaders of the corporate sector who are now focused on climate change. So I would only like to end by welcoming you and appealing to the leaders of business over here that India, and of course all the countries that are represented here, have to take the lead, because this is going to be not only a major challenge, but an enormous opportunity to bring about a safer, cleaner, and a more sustainable form of life on this planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pachauri. I would now like to invite Mr. R. Mukundan, Managing Director, Tata Chemicals Limited, and Chairman, Executive Council, TERI BCSD, to deliver the special address.
Honorable Minister, Mr. Jayant Sinha, Mr. Paul Polman, Mr. Henrik Mattson, Mr. Rana Kapoor, my colleague Annapurna Vancheshwaran and Dr. Pachauri. Firstly, good morning to all of you, and I'm really delighted at the massive gathering we have. When we started this exercise, we were really, one of the things we were wondering about would be the response from the corporate sector. As Dr. Pachauri clearly highlighted, the great move forward in this dialogue and discussion and actually delivery of the climate change initiative, one of the key lead participants is going to be the corporate sector, and we need to lead this from the front, and that's been one of our moves, and we've been trying to galvanize the corporate sector to come to the center stage. Really delighted. For me, this is the first time at the Delhi, the World Sustainability Series forum, which we hold every year, and this is the year I take over as the chairman of the BCSD, and really delighted that we've chosen the right platform and the right forum and the massive participation here. One of the challenges we're going to face, of course, is how do we keep this engagement which has started with such a good response on an ongoing basis, so that when we lead this up to Paris, that it has a very tangible impact on the discussions and the impact on the ground. Broadly, the involvement of corporate sector in sustainability has been a long-standing effort within India, and in fact, TERI itself as an institution was long supported by Tata's, used to be called as Tata Energy Research Institute. For me, it's even more doubly delightful because my predecessor, Dr. Darbari Seth, was one of the ardent supporters and proponents to make sure this institution became one of the leading think tanks out of India, and I'm really delighted the position TERI has achieved today under the leadership of Dr. Pachauri. BCSD itself was set up by the TERI in 2001, and this was to get the corporate sector right in the center of sustainability. Presently in India, I just wanted to highlight, we've got over 100 corporate members, and they represent varied sections of Indian industry. And BCSD provides a very independent and a credible platform to corporate leaders to address issues related to sustainability and sustainable development. We also want to promote the other two aspects, which is social responsibility. Combine that with economic performance. Nowhere are we saying that economic performance needs to be subservient. Actually, the centrality of economic performance will be done through sustainability and the social engagement. We engage with international bodies, government ministries, departments, and other associations. And actually, our impact, we want to bring it to the entire supply chain as at the various points, and the various points of fulcrum of the supply chain. TERI BCSD is a global network. We have partnership with WBCSD based in Geneva, and some of the areas we work are co-creating business solutions, sustainability advisory services, training and capacity building, business responsibility and transparency, and policy advocacy. Over the years, we've had many leading corporates, including 14 Tata companies which are members of this. And the first challenge we have here today, this is the first of the series which leads up to tabling Delhi to Paris, the corporate vision for climate change, documented COP21 in Paris. We hopefully will deliver it in time. And beyond that, I would certainly say that there is a need for the corporate sector to do two things, in my view, which are central. Number one, we need to play a leadership role in this change, which I think is the first L. The second one, of course, is we need to engage with the community to have a change of lifestyle. I'm a firm proponent that whatever we do on the larger scale cannot have a major impact unless we change our lifestyle. I think our lifestyle has gone beyond the supporting status of this planet, and whatever we can do to make that shift and change will lead to sustainable planet in future. Thank you very much once again for the wonderful participation. Thank you all and the dais, dignitaries on the dais for your support, and we will continue to engage with this theme of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mukundan. I would now like to invite Mr. Rana Kapoor, Managing Director and CEO, Yes Bank, and patron member, TERI BCSD, to deliver the special address.
Honorable Minister of Finance, Mr. Jayant Sinha, Dr. R.K. Pachauri, Director General. To me, he is the barometer of climate change in the world. Leaders on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, a very good morning to all of you. This high-level corporate dialogue is undoubtedly the most significant platform that brings to the forefront some of the most important developmental challenges that India faces. I'm certain that discussions over the day today and next couple of days will be highly meaningful in coming out with some tangible outcomes, some action steps which can progress our way to Paris by December this year. To me, a session like this is almost like the start point of a marathon where we all get together with our diversity, with our competitive instincts, and then we run in a sort of a mania with a common objective to get towards a common goal in spite of being competitors. And to me, this needs tremendous perseverance, tremendous dedication, a die-hard spirit, and the kind of stamina that Dr. Pachauri has demonstrated over many decades. We need such a sustainable mania which can steadily take us towards our goals. Ladies and gentlemen, TERI, for its energy, for its sustainable energy, more than anything else, has been the bedrock of what I like to believe is a very honest and good relationship. It has become, this conference in a way, has become the bastion of positive thinking, positive outcomes towards coming out with common goals in our aspiration in achieving sustainable objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, I represent still the youngest bank in the country, which is just about 10 years old. I'm very pleased to report to you that as a bank, from the very inception in 2004, we, by choice, decided to incorporate the principles of sustainability in our business model. And not just as a marketing strategy, but truly in terms of the genetics, of the bank. And we coined a term called responsible banking. It's taken us 10 years through the global crisis, the Eurozone crisis, India's own crisis over the last 3 odd years, which is improving now. And we have been able to demonstrate the tenacity of mitigation, adaptability, and resilience over this last 1 decade as a relatively young bank. Needless to say, there are programs that we have come out with, which will be difficult for me to elaborate in the course of the proceedings, but just community engagement in itself has been a key differentiator for our rather young bank. I also like to believe that as public trust institutions, banks, financial institutions, which in a way are baskets of the economy, and Dr. Pachauri spoke about corporate action, to me a bank which is a basket of the economy can play a tremendous influencing role in a way organizing corporate actions, in coming out with risk principles which can help achieve our common goals. I like to believe, and my perspective this morning is to really address a corporate vision on climate change from a banking standpoint. First and foremost, I believe that there are 6 key issues that banks can work towards in terms of our accountability at Paris, in terms of our discussions, and I enumerate these 6 points. Number 1, we need to recalibrate our risk management to integrate climate change considerations in the way banks assess and approve risks at board committees in our risk management architecture. I have reason to believe that pricing of such loans should also reflect the underlying risks of climate change manifested in some of the corporate businesses that we lend to. Even some of the banking products that we sell, for example, may have insurance underlying it, but the potential impact of climate change on an event needs to be also factored. So I have reason to believe that as we rebalance portfolios in view of potential risks from climate change, for example, financing agricultural crops can change with falling productivity of a few crops. For instance, predictions on sunshine can change the cash flow of solar farms. So this needs to be reflected in the way banks make decisions. The second point I want to make here is that driving financial innovation in itself, and as we seek new opportunities, too requires and warrants how we are going to create new financial models, particularly as we see new opportunities surface. It's quite a coincidence that on page 10 of Times of India today, the Ministry of Renewable Energy has actually hardwired renewable energy objectives by stating that they wish to achieve 100,000 megawatts of solar energy by 2020, 60,000 megawatts of wind energy, I think 5,000 megawatts of small hydro, and I think 10,000 megawatts of bioenergy. To me, this in itself is an opportunity for the banks. So I did have a conference call before coming here to tell my teams, let's gear up and let's see if we can make some financial commitments to the sector that we have specialized as a relatively young bank, for instance. Even financing disruptive technologies, to me, is an opportunity in terms of how we can achieve our climate change goals. If you see, for instance, M-Pesa in Kenya, the kind of financial inclusion benefits is being able to generate. I think Yes Money, for instance, a relatively nascent program, has been able to achieve, in a smallish way, tremendous penetration in our urban and rural markets, for instance. The conception of green bonds, and I hope there is some discussion in the course of the proceedings. India has not seen the advent of green bonds, but our bank, in the course of this month, will be launching the first time ever green bonds in my country. I also like to believe the opportunities related to the National Clean Energy Fund of the Government of India can be reorientated towards achieving some of our climate goals. The fourth point I want to make is transparency in reporting. I think that reporting itself in our annual reports, in our governance, accountability, needs to also reflect the manner in which banks and institutions actually handle such exposures. And my final point is designing the future rather than worrying about the past. This in itself means creating management frameworks, risk architecture, looking at leadership structures, as well as employee incentives to reflect the advent of such risks. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I like to believe that there is tremendous opportunity in adversity, and as was stated earlier by Dr. Pachauri, that there are 2 or 3 points on which I would like to conclude. And to me, one, building a balanced world is challenging, but no one has all the answers, as we all know. As the economies develop and continue to focus, financial institutions will play an important role in meeting the growing global demand for capital. Meeting the challenge of taking action on climate change will require prudent financial innovations, skilled people, technical prowess, and responsible stewardship. Through this platform today and next couple of days, I request all of us to look at how banks need to play this role of responsibility and accountability, particularly in our country where some of these risks are growing quite rapidly. And I'm sure that with your inputs, the Indian banking sector in itself can make a significant difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. May I now invite Dr. Henrik O. Madsen, Group President and CEO, DNVGL, to deliver the keynote address.
Dr. Pachauri, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here today to address you all. We are able to understand the complex and systemic risks that are surrounding us. And this means that we know where we are headed if we do not change course. And we are on an unsustainable pathway. We know the effects that climate change will bring. We know that we use more of the Earth's resources than Earth can regenerate. We may know less of the effect of the loss of biodiversity, but we can only assume that this is serious as well. And the cost of inaction will be higher than the cost of action. However, if we succeed in looking at these global risks through the lenses of opportunities, these can also be truly exciting times. And I firmly believe that we, as a society, and the greatest risk that we face right now is by not seeing the opportunities that are inherent in the transition to a safe and sustainable future. And limiting ourselves by looking only at the risks to the lifestyles and business that we know of today will definitely cloud our vision. This year marks two important events. The Sustainability Development Goals will be published and hopefully embraced from all corners of the world. And the COP21 in Paris in December will hopefully lead to commitments to reduce emission of greenhouse gases to stay within the 2-degree scenario. In the NVGL, we believe that business must be part of creating the solutions, together with government, academia, and civil society. And business is increasingly being accepted as a vital part of creating solutions. Also, many companies and business leaders all over the world are embracing the concept of sustainable development and growing their business in line herewith. And growth and sustainability need not be in conflict. In fact, we've seen sustainability drives growth through opportunities for innovation, cost efficiency, and risk management. But leaders and companies must be purpose-driven and openly state which purpose their company plays in serving the communities and citizens in which it operates and in which it makes its profits. And only when this purpose is aligned with the long-term interest of the community will the company have a long and prosperous future. And in order to get there, we need to break the link between the pursuit of human ambition and the depletion of natural environment. We need to reinvent growth and create a growth model that is fit for the 21st century. But I believe that first we need to shift to a new strategic mindset, a mindset that can transform the risks that we know of into opportunities. Which is why we, together with the UN Global Compact and the Monday Morning Global Institute, have initiated the Global Opportunity Report. The very first edition of the report was launched in Zurich in January earlier this year, with the support of Dr. Pachauri and Terry. And with this report, we and our partners wish to replace the concern instilled by risk with a confidence inspired by opportunities. The Global Opportunity Report offers an ambitious contribution to this, a guide to global opportunities for building a safe and sustainable future, a navigation system for global change makers, enabling us to move faster and safer towards solutions in a complex, fragile, and uncertain environment. And we believe that this guide is urgently needed. And for us at the NVGL, the Global Opportunity Report demonstrates our vision of having a global impact for a safe and sustainable future. And it certainly adds inspiration for our own people, our customers, and stakeholders. So Winston Churchill once said, "A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." So let's be optimists. Let's join forces on a journey towards a new strategic mindset of opportunities, open innovation, and co-creation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Madsen. I would now like to invite Mr. Paul Polman, CEO, Unilever, and Chairman, WBCSD, to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Excellency, distinguished guests, friends. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's actually a great honor to stand in front of you at this high-level corporate dialogue ahead of the Sustainable Development Summit. Again, I have to congratulate Terry. What you've built in the last 15 years is remarkable, but it's only possible by personally acknowledging my friend, obviously, and the really, may I call you, founder, Dr. Pachauri, for his leadership, both here at Terry, but also in all of the things that we are working on at a global level, the work that the IPCC has done is obviously enormous. So I think we owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. I don't think, yeah, that's actually right. I've personally seen an enormous change in the discussions, an enormous change in the level of knowledge that CEOs have around these topics, be it at the UN Climate Summit in New York, the World Economic Forum just 2 weeks ago, or many of the other things that we're doing leading up to the COP21. And I think that level of education, that level of knowledge, that level of confidence to do the right thing is only possible because of the enormous education that has happened via him and the IPCC and the courage that they've had to put a lot of the science into the public debate at, may I say, sometimes personal risk. It's also a great pleasure to be here in India, where the perspective of the people I meet is always very refreshing. I can tell you I was here about 1.5 years ago, also in Delhi, as a coincidence, and here again for the last 2 days, had the opportunity to meet the minister as well. And the mood has changed in the country. The mood has changed, obviously, for the better. But not only for the better for India, for development, but also you are seriously starting to think about and discuss and actually put in action the way you want to develop. And I think there's no better opportunity now to have responsible growth in India to the benefit of all. And I think the world is looking forward to that. In India, in my opinion, sustainable development has never been seen as a challenge, but actually as an opportunity for the right investments in the future. 2015, as some of the previous speakers have mentioned, is absolutely a critical year. We're very fortunate, in fact, that in the same year we have to deal with the development goals post-2015, which are the followers to the Millennium Development Goals. Not surprisingly now, people are talking about calling it Sustainable Development Goals. People understand that if we don't attack the issues of sustainability, there won't be any growth. Planetary boundaries in many countries in this world is already restricting the growth. And then at the same time, the opportunity in December to conclude, hopefully, an ambitious agreement, which is called the COP21 on climate change. If we miss that opportunity, and I hope we don't, but if we miss that opportunity, good luck for the ones that have to explain that to our children. Now, business has to play a crucial role and certainly has to step up to the plate to address these twin challenges of climate and development. They are actually different sides of the same coin, and I think people increasingly understand that. Now, the role that the Indian business plays is absolutely crucial. Soon you're going to be one of the fastest growing economies. You're the second biggest economy. There's no reason why in the near future you can't become the biggest economy. If India doesn't play a key role in addressing these challenges, we won't solve that on a global level. You are starting to realize that in your country, and indeed you're starting to rise to the challenges of this ambition that the world has set, and the efforts that you're doing to achieve that cannot be understated. But make no mistake globally, contrary to what you might read in the papers, where often the minority is vocal and the majority is still too silent. But make no mistake. The majority of businesses want our governments to act, but not only that, they want to be a constructive part of the solution, and increasingly so. And everywhere I go, I see that businesses are stepping up to the plate and driving actually their corporate strategies increasingly to a more sustainable strategy for prosperity and economic growth. Now, not surprisingly, with the data revolution that we've seen, the evidence is also overwhelming. A recent study by Oxford and the Smith School of Enterprise and Environment found, for example, that companies that really internalize these socially responsible standards are actually companies that have a lower cost of capital. Not surprising. You're talking here about risk mitigation, you're talking here about cost reductions, you're talking here about being a responsible company. A lower cost of capital translates in higher profitability, everything being equal, and obviously a better share price. That is increasingly appealing to even the hard-nosed capitalists out there that might not believe in some of the things that we're talking about. At least we have the facts here to support it financially. It's therefore not surprising that when we were in New York at the Climate Summit, we got over 1,000 companies to sign the World Bank statement for a price on carbon. In fact, 175 CEOs were at the Climate Summit. Never, ever have there been so many CEOs, obviously outnumbering the heads of states that were there, sending a clear signal that now is the time to take action. Many of these companies actually are reporting on carbon. 80% of the top 4,000 companies are actually reporting on carbon. 200 already have plans to reduce well beyond the 6% a year to stay below the 2 degrees. And actually 50 of these top 200 companies have targets in there to be to mitigate totally the effects of carbon well before 2050. Now, not only are companies and CEOs stepping up to the plate, the financial community is waking up as well. If you would have read what happened in New York in September, you would have seen that 24 trillion of capital, the big funds that we're talking about, are calling for a price on carbon as well, increasingly putting their investment portfolios where their mouth is. Larry Fink was here yesterday as a coincidence, also visiting India. He's been very vocal on having more transparency, looking at the longer term, putting prices on carbon. The financial community is stepping up. And also with their investments, obviously. You heard Rana Kapoor talk about the role that the financial market plays in catalyzing the move to sustainable energy. We see these investments now, 2/3 of the investments are actually coming from the private sector. 50% of the capacity increase globally in the energy sector globally is already in green or sustainable energy. And not surprising, because 40 countries in the world already have a lower price for sustainable energy than they have for carbon-based energy. And that is rapidly becoming true in India as well, where you already have 2 states where that is the case, and I think that equation will only go up between now and the end of this decade. Now, it's not only the CEOs or the financial community, it's also consumers that are stepping up. You saw 300,000 people in the streets in New York and in many other places in the world, demanding action. People will see that, yes, we want growth and we want jobs, but it cannot come at every price. If it comes at the price of livability in cities, not being able to breathe, or not using some of the resources that we call basic necessities as a result of climate change, consumers are getting interested as well. Dr. Pachauri already rightfully mentioned the New York Times article, but what is actually remarkable about this New York Times article is that this is happening in the US, which you would not have thought about 5 years ago. These articles would not have appeared in any of these newspapers. Now, according to that same article, 83% of American consumers, so it's not a question of the left or the right or Republicans or Democrats or what you say, 83% of consumers believe that if nothing is done to reduce emissions, global warming will be the most serious problem in the future. That is risky business indeed, and it will affect the elections increasingly so. From the US to China to Europe, we see major countries making commitments to get to this net zero emission by the end of the decade, or I would submit we need it earlier. Momentum is building. Momentum is building at a higher pace than at any time in history. Now, we have embarked on the road to Paris, and frankly, time is ticking. It's in December, early December, and a lot of the hard work has already been done, but we need to keep the pressure up. Nations are hard at work preparing their submissions. They're actually called INDCs, individual targets. The question is, are all these individual targets going to add up to get to this goal of net zero emission? Most likely not. I don't know where we will come out, we'll see that in June, but the chances are that we will not add up to stay within the 2 degrees. And this is really what I want to talk about, because if the general consensus is that the sum of the total in June doesn't add up, what do we need to do as business community to be sure that we get these ambitious agreements in December? And that requires hard work. And it requires the involvement of all of us, including the business community here in India. I would even submit, without the business community in India, I wouldn't have the confidence that we would get an ambitious agreement in December. Today is an important day for you, because you'll put yourselves together around these tables by sector, under Jonathan's leadership, Jonathan Porrett, who's here with us, to really see if you can share with each other your ambitions, your commitments that you make in your companies, but more importantly, if you can add up these commitments and these actions to something bigger than what we each are individually able to achieve. And if there is a loud voice coming from India as well, hopefully in your budget at the end of this month, and some clear signs that you also want to go well beyond what is currently committed to stay below the 2 degrees, and the business community speaks up at the same time. I believe we have a fair chance to get a decent agreement in Paris for the benefit of ourselves and future generations. In fact, we're putting businesses together around the world across all of the sectors. Sectors that are familiar to you, like the basic building industry or infrastructure, transportations, food systems, banking, and all of these. We will see with each of these sectors what initiatives are already happening at a global level and how we can drive to scale faster than we would otherwise be possible. What policy measures are needed, what incentives are needed, or sometimes perverse incentives reversed. And that courage, hopefully, will send a big signal to our politicians, again, to come out with more than they otherwise would be capable of. Now, the consumer sector, for example, which is one of the sectors I represent, and you're all familiar with HUL, Hindustan Lever here in India, but obviously at the global level as well, we are very concerned about deforestation. It's interesting, but the whole food chain, 50% of the demand of food that is obviously there because of the population growth and changing dietary habits, 50% of the deforestation actually comes from the demand of food. And deforestation itself is about 15% of global warming. If we don't stop this deforestation, then we will never get to these goals. So it's not surprising that the global consumer goods industry, which is about $3 to $4 trillion globally, has made a commitment by 2020 to not sell anything anymore that comes from what I call illegal deforestation. Our company has already achieved that target last year, but I think we will be able to move the whole industry. That in itself, plus climate-smart agriculture, which you can also step up here in India, attacking the food waste, could be about 20 to 30% of global warming alone. That we can reverse and actually result in lower costs. Think about the food that you don't have to waste. Think about the higher productivity you can get off the land. Think about the ecosystems you preserve with the forests that are increasingly important to our livelihood and understood to be so. Enormous opportunities there alone. Can we get these commitments from each of these sectors to add up to this to overall target that we're after? Now, what do we need from governments? Because I don't want to stand here and say this is what business and all of us can do. And I know you will step up to the plate, but we also need to be getting more and clearer signals from the governments. The first thing which business absolutely needs is clarity. If we don't have clarity, we don't invest. I hear that everywhere across every sector. So this policy certainty of saying we want to achieve net zero emission anywhere between 2050 and the end of this decade is absolutely key to unlock a lot of the technologies and investments that are going to accelerate the change. The other thing is the price on carbon. Don't be shy on that. Things in business that we don't measure, we don't treasure. Overwhelmingly, people understand now that if there is a price on carbon, and it is not very practical to expect a global price right now, but let's start with normal pricing systems at a local or regional level. And again, many countries or many regions have experimented with that already and seeing the positive effects, including, by the way, in the US, where you have some states that have a price on carbon. We need to insist on that. Then we need to work on the financing. There is no doubt that we can catalyze financing. There's a very important meeting coming up this summer in July in Addis Ababa. We need to be sure that, again, we have the financing right, which has two sides of the coin. It is the right financing to catalyze extra funds from business. And by the way, business will continue to provide 70, 80, 90% of the funding. By the way, business globally, it's about 60% of the global economy. It's about 80% of the global financial flow and 90% of the job creation. I could not find a better arguments why we need to work hand in hand with governments to solve these issues. But think about the money that has been committed by governments in the Red Plus Fund, the Green Climate Fund, all talking about 100 billion or more. Think about how much more money that will catalyze. Now think also about the opportunity that we have with the lower oil prices right now to take these perverse subsidies that are still lingering across the world in perverse fuel subsidies out of the system. In fact, some people estimate that between 800 billion and 1 trillion of perverse subsidies are still there, driving you actually to a carbon economy at a time that we can afford at least. And then finally, we need from governments the courage to look at all of these challenges that we have and encourage these public-private partnerships that we're talking about to galvanize this change. Now, during the last 12 months, I've had the privilege to serve on the Global Commission of the Economy and Climate. It's actually chaired by President Felipe Calderon, who will be here tonight and tomorrow, I believe. And it also included the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, which is located right here in Delhi. So it certainly had a lot of your input in there. And tomorrow, the Global Commission will launch the latest report, in this case on India, which is entitled Pathways to Sustainable Rapid Development in a New Climate Economy. The report's authors argue that through good choices in simply 3 sectors, the 3 sectors are energy systems, cities, and land use, India can boost its economic development, ensure inclusive growth, and reduce the risk of dangerous climate change. In fact, 6 to 7% of total GDP, 1% additional growth a year, can be unlocked by attacking just those 3 areas holistically. Yes, all at the same time, no misplaced trade-offs in any of these. Now, that's good for business if you ask me. The report's recommendations recognize that this visionary path already has been started. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet the Prime Minister Modi and actually listening to all of your plans, be it smarter cities, be it Make in India, be it Clean India, obviously directly linked to the development agenda, but an opportunity to do that smartly and attack at the same time the issues of climate change that we're talking today. And that development is more needed than ever. Over 300 million people still in India lack the access to modern energy and are waiting for it. 50% of your energy is still provided by simply wood burning. 1 million people lose their lives every year unnecessarily on things we can change if we decide to do that and make the same commitments as your government has taken with clean toilets and other things in the areas of sanitation. It can be done. Today's oil prices, as I said before, is an ideal time to move even further on your fuel reforms and move to a greener economy. And you can do that actually while still having net positive revenues, cashing in on the enormous fuel savings that you make with the lower prices that we have. It's also the case in India that we find half the world's polluted cities. You take the 30 top polluted cities, 15 of the top 30 are in India. Delhi certainly hits the charts, and people will not accept that much longer. Even in my business, we have issues in actually growing in this. The urbanization has moved from 200 million to 400 million in the last 15, 20 years, and will move to 600 million in India. Even right now, in places like Mumbai, our products, the ability for us to sell products is already limited by the availability of water and other things that are directly affected by climate change. Our growth is already being stifled, and I think that is the case for other companies as well. So this new climate economy report, I encourage you to read that and see if there are any things that you and your businesses can actually pick up on and drive to scale as well. And then the last area is agriculture. Fortunately, you are in a good position to feed yourselves, but agriculture is not actually the most efficient profession that you have right now. So we need to move rapidly to climate-smart agriculture there as well, which has an enormous, enormous climate component to it. There's no shortage of opportunities here, as has been mentioned before. There is no better time for Indian business to seize this moment in a way that meets your needs as businesses to grow, but also meets the needs of the people, especially the ones at the bottom of the pyramid that have been desperately waiting for it. It is clear that the agenda on which we are now embarking is an exciting one, but it certainly is a transformational one. A transformational one for companies, but more importantly, for individuals, for families, for whole communities, and indeed for the future of India. Infrastructure, cleaner energies, healthier consumers, happier employees, all result in faster growing economies. I've often said that you cannot have a healthy business in an unhealthy world. And if you ever had been persuaded before that delivering sustainable development and tackling climate change are in some ways a constraint to growth, I hope that you now recognize that actually the opposite is true. If we don't tackle climate change, we won't get the growth. This is only the beginning, I think, of this pathway that we need to get on. I hope you're embracing that as much as we do. for the benefit of everybody, but above all, for the benefit of the people that cannot be here, which are actually the poor themselves who suffer the most from that. And I think whatever we do today, whatever we talk for our companies, let's keep in mind why we're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pullman. Ladies and gentlemen, on this special occasion, we are delighted to release knowledge papers that have been prepared jointly by Terry and Yes Bank. There are two knowledge papers being released today. The knowledge paper on enabling finance for scaling up energy efficiency in MSMEs, and the knowledge paper on Ganga and inclusive multi-stakeholder growth. May I please invite Dr. R.K. Pachauri and Mr. Rana Kapoor to please release the knowledge papers in presence of the Honorable Minister, Mr. Sinha. May I now request Mr. Kapoor to release the Ganga map, which is a map which highlights the pollutants adversely affecting the Ganga basin, and present it to the dignitaries on the dais. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Mr. Jayant Sinha, Honorable Minister of State for Finance, India, to deliver the awaited inaugural address. Sir.
Dr. Pachauri, Mr. Rana Kapoor, Mr. Mukundan, Dr. Madsen, Mr. Polman, Ms. Annapurna, ladies and gentlemen, and friends from the media, good morning to all of you. I want to start my speech with a personal story. And this is from 30 years ago. Back then, I was a student of chemical engineering at IIT Delhi. And for my final year project, I decided to work on a problem that was very close to my heart because I come from one of India's poorest states, which is Jharkhand. And I wanted to work on a smokeless chulha, which is a smokeless wood stove. So I worked on that. And as a result of that, I got very interested in issues of sustainability and appropriate technology. And I wanted to pursue graduate studies in this area. And I found a wonderful program at the University of Pennsylvania where I could actually do this program. Unfortunately, I was just a student, an humble student from India, and I could not afford to go for this master's program. But what I did was I looked up the advisory board for this program, and I found the name of an individual there who was in India, and I said I should reach out to this gentleman. And his name was Dr. R.K. Pachauri. So I got in, this is 30 years ago. So I got in touch with Dr. Pachauri, and I went to speak to him, and I told him that I'm very interested in issues of sustainability and appropriate technology, and I would like to get a letter of recommendation from him for this master's program. He was very gracious, he heard me out, and he wrote a letter of recommendation which led to a scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania and then launched me in my career. So I'm, of course, very, very grateful for Dr. Pachauri for having done that. And so when he asked me to speak at this conference, you can well understand I couldn't say no to him. And of course, Dr. Pachauri, in all these years, has helped countless others as well. So thank you, Dr. Pachauri, for all that you do for us and for India and the world. As you can also tell from the story, I have a long association, not just with appropriate technology and sustainability, but also around the notion of innovation and how to use technology to create products and services which can help make our lives easier. Now, you might understand that if you have a smoky wood stove, it creates a lot of problems. Not only do we have the deforestation problem that Paul was speaking about, but you also create a lot of smoke and a lot of pulmonary problems in the kinds of huts that people have where they're using these wood stoves. So these these kinds of innovations, these kinds of technologies can make our lives much easier, but they can also help conserve our environment. So innovation for sustainability is the true need of the hour and the solution to many of the complex problems that we are facing today. And so here I am today, from the Ministry of Finance, talking about climate and the environment. One might wonder how I or my ministry are connected to this. I often tell different stakeholders that we want to put India on a sustainable, non-inflation growth trajectory of 7 to 8% growth. This is not just a political necessity. This is a moral responsibility because we need to have this growth if we are going to be able to find employment for the 10 to 12 million young people that join our workforce every year. Such a high growth path would double the size of our economy in the next decade or so. And India will then emerge as a powerful economic force. And for this, we undoubtedly need to build our productive capacity, and we need a veritable supply-side revolution in India. But we also need to ensure that our growth is sustainable. None of us have any doubts that our country and the entire world faces a real and credible challenge on the environmental front. At conferences and fora, we can squabble. We can squabble over who has been responsible for global climate change. We can negotiate over who should compensate whom and by how much. But what we all must agree to is that this is a real and significant challenge which every country of the world is facing. And with erratic weather patterns, glacial melting, scarcity of water, the threat is staring us in our face here in India as well. When I see the pollution due to particulate matter here in Delhi, which by some accounts is the most polluted city on the planet, and I see the pollution from coal in my own constituency of Hazaribagh in Jharkhand, it's pretty obvious that we need to follow a low-carbon trajectory and work towards a low-carbon future. And as Indians, we need to protect our environment, not only because we are a responsible country, but also for our own sake. The high growth trajectory which we envision and the massive creation of jobs towards which we are working will undoubtedly pose challenges to sustainability. And I see three major challenges from an environmental perspective which can prevent us from sustainable growth. It's water scarcity, pollution, and climate change. All of these issues will become more serious as we keep growing faster, and all of them impact our lives in very direct ways. And for the past several years, I don't think we have done enough to promote sustainable growth. So to continue on our growth trajectory, we need to grow sustainably, and we need to ensure it right now. The clock is ticking. And so the question becomes, how do we get to this sustainable growth trajectory? How do we ensure that we are growing fast and at the same time that our growth is sustainable? And in my view, there is really only one answer to that problem, and that answer is innovation. We should not only make in India, but we should also innovate in India for India. It is this innovation which can help us solve our environmental problems and let us grow sustainably. We need to develop a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem which incubates, nurtures, and promotes entrepreneurs who can develop innovative products and find solutions to our problems. If entrepreneurs massively step up, innovating in India, I can assure you that the government will back them and provide support. So what do I mean when I say innovate for India? You see, the demands and problems in India are different from what developed countries in the West face. In San Francisco, in the heart of the innovation capital of the world, one might come up with a mobile app which can tell you where your friends are watching the basketball game this evening. But what we need in India is technology and innovation which can solve the problems not of the top 1 billion people of this planet, but the next 5 billion. We might need to innovate to develop technology for our farmers that can provide cheap electricity off-grid, that can result in mini waste disposal systems in every village. This is the less explored territory. And that is where investors and entrepreneurs should look, and that is how we must innovate in India. So today, when India is undergoing a huge transformation, if we can unleash our best entrepreneurs and innovators, we will be able to transform several important areas. such as power, buildings, and transportation. By having distributed solar rooftops in homes and offices, and using wind power to operate irrigation pumps, we can solve the problems of energy scarcity and carbon emissions at the same time. We can have buildings that are energy efficient. We can use LED lighting systems and properly design heating and cooling systems. We can totally transform our transportation sector with the use of electric scooters and cars. If we can improve our public transport system with good trains, metros, and carpools, we can significantly get down our carbon footprint. As a venture capitalist, I have invested in several companies which are trying to solve such problems at the base of the pyramid, and which are examples of sustainable growth. D-Light, a company which I invested in, makes and distributes solar lanterns and solar home systems. Imagine people in disconnected villages getting cheap electricity without the need for a grid and in a way which is entirely friendly to the environment. When it comes to innovating for sustainability, I really want to recognize the work that TERI has done. For instance, they have done some very interesting work around mini-grids, something on which the government and entrepreneurs are now starting to pay a lot of attention. Their smart mini-grids, which enable you to balance electricity use, I think is exemplary. Another example that TERI has innovated and is, I think, very well worth propagating and scaling up is around biodegradable plastics, which are based on biopolymers. That is precisely the kind of innovation that we need in India. And that is a great example for all the rest of us to innovate that is really focused in India for India. And I'd like to end by saying the following. Often we are expected to take sides in the debate between growth and conserving the environment. People ask, which is more important? It is a false trade-off. And I say that's the wrong way to look at it. Technology and sustainable growth are not in an adversarial relationship. They can be effectively used to complement one another. With clever and innovative technology, we can develop products which promote sustainable growth. And only with sustainable growth can we keep developing better technology. We need a true partnership between business, innovators, and in terms of environmental conservation. And which is why I want to close by saying we truly need to innovate for sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. Trisha is TERI's research initiative in SUPI for Himalayan advancement, and it supports farmers with limited resources of income and has helped the farmers overcome many tribulations ranging from the availability of resources to qualms about crop yields and the adoption of new crop technologies. May I now request Dr. Pachauri to kindly give a small memento which has herbs grown at Trisha to Mr. Sinha. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now request Dr. Annapurna Vancheswaram, Director, Sustainable Development Outreach, TERI, to give her closing remarks and the vote of thanks.
As a woman, I think I am different. I take the podium which the men did not take. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Shri Jayant Sinha, Honorable Minister, dignitaries on the dais, our most valued guests, I, on behalf of TERI and on my own behalf, extend our gratitude to the Minister for his presence here and to the entire, let me call it the fraternity of conscious corporate leaders to have assembled today for the high-level corporate dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, since 2004, this corporate dialogue has become an integral part of the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit, bringing together over 1,500 international and Indian CEOs, senior government officials, and luminaries from across the globe. A big thank you, Honorable Minister Shri Jayant Sinha, to have shared your thoughts on how innovation could become part of the value proposition for business. The corporate dialogue this year, themed Delhi to Paris, Corporate Vision on Climate Change, is an effort to formulate an action plan to be carried out in the months leading to the Conference of Parties later this year. The format of the HLCD this year is unique. We are fortunate to have two global corporate leaders amongst us to help kickstart our proceedings. I must mention Our deep sense of appreciation for Mr. Paul Polman and Mr. Matson for leading the sustainability path through their sheer commitment, which is unmatched. Is Indian businesses ready to commit to the sustainability agenda? Given the attendance today, the answer is an emphatic yes. We are grateful to Mr. Mukundan to have stepped in as the chairman of the Terry Business Council Executive Committee, a consortium of nearly 100 member companies from diverse sectors across the country. I need to express my sincere thanks to Mr. Rana Kapoor and to Yes Bank for being an ardent supporter of the Terry Business Council and its mission. Yes Bank, along with the research team, has helped in bringing out several knowledge papers like the one that we will release today. As patron member of the Terry Business Council, it did not take much time for Mr. Rana Kapoor and his team to pledge their complete support to this dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, the champions deserve a round of applause. I'd like to thank Ingersoll Rand, Hitachi, DNV, ADB, and 3 organizations from Gujarat, the Gujarat Energy Development Agency, Gujarat National Fertilizer Company, and Vasmo, to have also taken up this challenge. May I take this opportunity of thanking them for being part of our mission and reposing their faith on us. Our special partners, we mean business, need a special mention. The partnership alliance that has been garnered in such a short time merits mention. My sincere thanks to all the partners for your backing and support. Finally, without the enormous cooperation of all my colleagues at Terry, it would not have been possible to organize this event. They deserve, once again, a round of applause, a big hand for my colleagues. As Mr. Polman mentioned, that we have just after this, immediately we move to the 10 core issues that the corporate sector will be discussing. I can't end my vote of thanks before thanking Sir Jonathan Porritt to have taken up this challenge of taking on the rest of the day and meeting with the corporate sector and discussing the 10 core issues which the corporate sector will bring with some actions on the table. I would also like to end my vote of thanks appropriately because, as given that Dr. Pachauri talked about risky business, we've talked about the New York Times newspaper that has covered this. We are talking about business in a risky environment, and hence this quote, which is oft said, but with a slight change, what we do makes a difference, and we have to decide what kind of difference we want to make. With this, may I welcome you all to the curtain raiser of the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit, the high-level corporate dialogue. Thank you to all. Thank you to all.